called To the Pacific and Back. All right, so where is the Atlantic Ocean? You guys should know this by now. Right there. What about the Appalachian Mountains? Right there. How about the Mississippi River? Right there. What about the Rocky Mountains? Right over here. What about the Louisiana Purchase? Between the Missouri River and the Rocky Mountains. So all this land right there. How about the Missouri River? Yep, it connects to the Mississippi River at St. Louis and it goes up to the Rocky Mountains. How about the Pacific Ocean? Right here. All right, where do you think Lewis and Clark will be on the map after today's read aloud? Let's see if your prediction is right. What tasks have Lewis and Clark accomplished so far? They have become friends with Native Americans, right? They made friends with the Yankton Sioux, the Teton Sioux, the Mandans, the Hidatses, the Shoshone, and they encountered and made notes about prairie dogs, pronghorn antelope, bison, red cedar trees, grizzly bears, other plants and animals, and they sent some members of their group back east to take samples to President Jefferson. What task were Lewis and Clark unable to accomplish? What? Oh my goodness, guys, I'm sorry. What task were Lewis and Clark unable to accomplish? And why? They weren't able to find an all-water route to the Pacific Ocean because there wasn't one, right? How do you think their expedition is going to end? What do you think is going to happen? Well, let's find out. Okay, so today you're going to hear about the last portion of Lewis and Clark's expedition. Listen carefully to find out whether or not Lewis and Clark made it to the ocean and if everyone made it back home. The closer Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, Sacagawea, and their friends came to the Pacific, the more Native American people they met. This land was home to many Native Americans who had lived there in settled communities for a long, long time. Communities are groups of people who live together in the same place. With the help of the Shoshones and the Nez Perce, the Corps of Discovery crossed the Rocky Mountains, which stood between them and the Pacific Ocean. A new, powerful river began in these mountains. The captains hoped to ride it downhill to the ocean, but the Nez Perce warned. In some places, the river rushes through narrow rock canyons, moving so quickly and so powerfully that it is difficult to control a boat there. Canyons are steep, rocky valleys. You could be hurt if your boat hits the canyon walls or the sharp rocks stick out of the water. William Clark and the group's best canoeist climbed the rocks to look down at this part of the river. A canoeist is someone who paddles a canoe. They heard the roar of the water charging through the narrow canyon even before they saw it. Walking atop the rock rim high above, Clark asked the canoeist, "What do you think?" "Captain," the canoeist answered, "I expect to play my violin at our next campsite downriver after we get safely through this canyon." This means the canoeist thinks they can make it through the canyon. Clark grinned. "That's what I wanted to hear. Let's find the others." The men pushed off from the shore, and the pirogues and the canoes plunged into the rapids. The mighty current, or strong flow of water, pushed and pulled the boats, but working together the men steered or guided the boats around rocks and away from the canyon walls, keeping their balance whenever the river threatened to tip over the boats. Finally, they shot out the other end of the rocky canyon into the calm water. John Shields turned to his young friend, George Shannon. What do you think, George? Soon afterward, the men landed on an island in the middle of the river, just short of the place where the river emptied into the ocean. There, with the help of neighboring Native Americans, they survived another long, cold, rainy winter. At last, the weather cleared, and they were able to travel the rest of the way to the Pacific Ocean. There, before them, was the sight they had dreamed of seeing, the Pacific Ocean. Some of the men cheered, others stood in silent contentment. This means that they stood happily and quietly looking at the Pacific Ocean. Sacagawea was amazed. She had never seen an ocean or even a picture of one. Clark heard that a whale had washed up nearby on the beach, and he took Sacagawea to see it. She told him, "I have traveled a long way with you to see the great waters, and now I have seen this monstrous whale as well. I am so happy to see the ocean." Then she walked along the sand, happily letting the waves wash over her feet. On March 23rd, 1806, nearly 2 years after first leaving St. Louis, the Corps of Discovery turned to head for home. They had mapped a great deal of the Louisiana Territory and beyond, from the Mississippi River to the Pacific. That means that they had been able to draw maps of the areas across which they had traveled. They now knew how to get to the Pacific. They could take the Missouri River to the Rockies, cross the Rockies on foot, and then take other rivers to the Pacific Ocean. They had made friends with many Native Americans. They found out that no single river ran all the way from the Mississippi to the Pacific. They had learned about many animals, birds, fish, and insects. They had more adventures on the journey home, of course, but in the end, everyone got back safe, except for a few who chose not to go back. John Colter, the man from whom the Teton Sioux had taken a horse, told Meriwether Lewis, "Captain, I have had enough of cities and crowds. I will stay in the West, if you let me." So Colter went to live among the Mandan people, promising, "I'll be here when you come back," and more than one of his friends did go back to visit him later. Sacagawea and her husband, Toussaint Charbonneau, with their little son that everyone called Pompey, went home to the Shoshone. Lewis and Clark told Sacagawea, "If you were not here, we would never have succeeded." Sacagawea replied, "You showed me the great waters. We are friends. We helped each other." Setting off again, Lewis and Clark watched Sacagawea with her son in her arms, waving from the shore until a bend in the river blocked them from sight. Was Lewis and Clark's expedition a success? Why or why not? I think so, because, even though they didn't accomplish all the tasks, they were still able to accomplish 2 of them fully, and then one of them, they still got to the Pacific Ocean, and most of it was through water, so I think they were successful. All right. Months later, the travelers reached home. There, they said their goodbyes and went their various ways, some to more adventures and some to quieter lives. Perhaps you would like to know what happened to the 4 people who had been most responsible for the journey. Meriwether Lewis became governor of the entire Louisiana Territory. William Clark became the governor of Missouri, then spent much of the rest of his life working with Native Americans on behalf of the government's newly created Bureau of Indian Affairs. Thomas Jefferson continued as president until 1809. 8 years later, James Monroe, who had arranged for Jefferson to buy the Louisiana Territory, was elected himself as the President of the United States. So Jefferson was the president who bought the Louisiana Territory, and he hired Lewis and Clark to explore it. James Monroe was Jefferson's friend who traveled to France to buy New Orleans and Louisiana Territory. All right? Excuse me. So, were your predictions correct? So, did Lewis and Clark reach the Pacific Ocean? Yeah. Did everyone in the read aloud make it back home safely? Yes, everyone who decided to go home made it back. Some people chose to stay and live in the Louisiana Territory, right? Why did Jefferson send Lewis and Clark to explore the Louisiana Territory? No one in the United States knew what the Louisiana Territory was like. What were the 3 tasks Jefferson asked Lewis and Clark to complete? He asked them to make friends with the Native Americans, collect samples of plants and animals, and to find an all-water route to the Pacific. Were Lewis and Clark able to accomplish all 3 tasks? No. Which of the tasks were they not able to accomplish? They weren't able to find an all-water route to the Pacific Ocean, right? They had to go on foot through the Rockies, and then they could sail through other rivers to get to the Pacific Ocean. Which ones did they accomplish? They made friends with the Native Americans, and they recorded information and collected samples of plants and animals, right? Which one of these tasks do you think was the most important? And why do you think that's the most important? There's no right or wrong answer. I would probably say that I thought that the most important would be to make friends with the Native Americans because we took over their land. So we moved into their land. So I think it would be important that we had a good relationship with them. But that's just my opinion. And it's okay to have different opinions. All right, in the read aloud you heard, when the explorers finally saw the Pacific Ocean, some of them cheered. Others stood in silent contentment. Say the word contentment with me. You can whisper it, mass voice it, monster voice it. Contentment. 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 When someone is feeling contentment, they're feeling happy and satisfied. A look of contentment showed on Shira's face when she finally finished her painting. Why is the word contentment a good word to use when describing some members of the Corps of Discovery when they had reached the Pacific Ocean? Try to use the word contentment in your response. What's the word we've been talking about? Contentment, which means feeling happy and satisfied. All right, guys. I hope you feel contentment after listening to this story. Talk to you next time. Bye.